terror, chaos, and carnage on a Southern California Christmas Eve. The man dressed as Santa armed himself with 4 guns and a makeshift flamethrower.
Some hide under furniture. Others jump from windows to escape.
The bodies inside so badly burned that police were unsure if the victims died in the shooting rampage or the subsequent fire.
This was not a random act of violence.
Neighbors can't believe this happened to what they call a happy, tight-knit family. Witnesses say they saw the suspect take the Santa suit off and walk away.
He said Merry Christmas to me and just kept walking down this way, and that was it.
December 24th, 2008. It's Christmas Eve in Covina, a quiet and tranquil suburban town near Los Angeles, California. With the holiday in full swing, only a few 911 operators and police officers are on duty. After all, Covina boasts one of the lowest crime rates in the region. Everything seemed calm until 10 minutes before midnight when every phone in the dispatch center started ringing simultaneously. One operator answered the first call. On the line was a frantic woman, her panicked voice rising in desperation.
Covina 911.
Hello.
Hi.
Please come immediately. He's shooting.
What's your address? Ma'am, I understand. I need to know your address.
Before she could explain further, the other operators were flooded with calls as well. It seemed like nearly every resident on East Knollcrest Drive was dialing 911 at the same time. Dispatchers quickly gathered the basic details. A massive explosion had been heard, a house was engulfed in flames, and terrified people were fleeing the area in chaos. But the first caller had an even more urgent matter to report.
Okay, can you tell if there's anybody injured? Because we have fire department and officers en route.
My daughter's been shot.
I let the officers know. The officers are making sure it's safe for the paramedics.
I need a bandage, please. She was shot in the face on the side and she's bleeding.
As the operator heard the sound of sirens approaching, the woman begged her to send more officers to the scene. Although authorities were already en route to address the fire, no one truly understood the severity of the situation unfolding inside the burning home, except for the distressed mother on the line.
Come immediately. I don't know who else is surviving.
I know, ma'am. Just stay on the phone with me, okay?
My whole family, there's 30 people, 25 people.
I know.
When the woman finally managed to explain that an intruder had started the blaze, the operator interrupted to ask whether he was still inside and what he was wearing so officers could identify him. The caller revealed that he had already fled the scene, but her description of the suspect's appearance left the operator utterly stunned.
What's he wearing?
What is he wearing? Please. What is he wearing? Please tell me. My nephew.
Okay, let me know what he's wearing.
Santa Claus clothes.
When I arrived, to describe it as apocalyptic would be accurate.
It was not just an ordinary house fire. Every window was engulfed in flames, and there was fire everywhere.
For hours, over 80 firefighters battled tirelessly to bring the raging fire under control. At the same time, police officers and paramedics concentrated on rescuing as many people as possible. Once the survivors were safely evacuated, Police Lieutenant Tim Doonan began interviewing witnesses.
The people that had escaped from the house told us the suspect dressed as Santa made his way into the house and began shooting everybody that he could see.
Among the accounts was a chilling observation. A neighbor and close family friend who had left the party just moments before the chaos began reported seeing a suspicious vehicle speeding away from the scene as smoke began to billow from the house.
A small blue car, and it was going at a high rate of speed, and the lights were out. And that just, for both my husband and I, was very strange.
Before Lieutenant Doonan could fully assess the situation, devastating news came in from the paramedics. 9 fatalities and 3 injured. All were members of the Ortega family, including an 8-year-old child clinging to life after being shot in the head. As if this grim revelation wasn't horrifying enough, another emergency call came through. Brad Pardo, a distant relative of the Ortega family who had not attended the party, reported yet another murder.
He had gone to a Christmas party that night and gotten home really late.
He opens the door and he sees something that he never expected to find on Christmas morning.
At his home, paramedics found a pistol on the floor, multiple bullet holes riddling the walls, and the most shocking sight of all, his brother Bruce lying dead in a pool of blood with another firearm in his hand.
Bruce's death was caused by one shot that was very close up with a 9mm handgun. It was all very strange.
It's hard to tell, what exactly happened.
The following day, with the surviving family members still hospitalized, Lieutenant Doonan turned his focus to the neighbors. He needed to understand how a man dressed as Santa Claus could have entered the Ortega home unnoticed. That's when he learned about Patrick, a family acquaintance who traditionally donned the red suit every other year.
The neighbor next door to me always played Santa for them.
We'd all sit around as cousins and wait for him to call our name to give us our one present that he gave to us.
At first, this seemed like a promising lead, but Doonan quickly ruled it out as a red herring.
We found out that neighbor had moved away. We believed there was still a suspect on the loose.
Even so, the neighbor's account confirmed one crucial detail. This was no random attack. The perpetrator not only knew the Ortegas, but was also familiar with their Christmas traditions.
We had a shooter that knew that there would be people there. They typically went until about midnight, until the kids were getting tired. And he knew that the neighbor had always dressed as Santa and come over to deliver presents to the kids.
Armed with this new understanding, Doonan headed to the charred remains of the Ortega residence for further investigation. Amid the ashes, he spotted dozens of bullet casings scattered across the scene, the same type of ammunition discovered at Brad Pardo's house the previous night. With this link established, Doonan left Knollcrest Drive to visit the second crime scene. There, he questioned Brad, piecing together what appeared to be a gunfight involving Bruce and an unidentified attacker. When asked if Bruce had any enemies, Brad firmly denied it, instead offering a glowing account of his brother's character.
Brad continues to further describe his brother as upbeat, charismatic, easygoing. Right out of college, he gets a job at the prestigious Jet Propulsion Laboratory, earning $122,000 a year.
But Brad hesitated when questioned about Bruce's family life. Just a week earlier, his brother had finalized his divorce from Sylvia Ortiz, his wife of 3 years. Although Brad claimed to know little about the situation, he did mention a connection between Sylvia and the horrific events in Covina.
They learn the name of his ex-wife is Sylvia Ortiz. Digging a little deeper, they discover her maiden name is Ortega.
Sylvia Ortega had attended the Christmas Eve party, but she hadn't been seen or heard from since. As Lieutenant Doonan prepared to request an update on her status over the radio, another alarming call came in. The blue Dodge Caliber that neighbors had reported seeing the previous night had been located.
And inside that car was the Santa suit and hundreds, if not thousands, of rounds of ammunition and a flare hanging down. When they pulled the Santa suit out of the car, it had pulled the string tight on that flare and it ignited the flare.
It was a deadly trap. As black powder beneath a flare began to ignite, officers scrambled for cover. Moments later, the car erupted in a massive explosion. The Santa suit and ammunition bag inside went up in flames, obliterating all the evidence it contained.
So not only does the car burn, but there's bullets cooking off and firing, and there's black powder blowing up.
No one is hurt in the blast, but the car is completely destroyed.
So much of the evidence was lost in the fire. A lot of questions that just go completely unanswered.
The lieutenant was left grappling with the enormity of the crime. Who could harbor such deep hatred toward a family, attacking their home on Christmas Eve, driving 30 miles north to murder an ex-husband, and finally booby-trapping the getaway vehicle to target the responding officers? Later that afternoon, on that same Christmas day, Doonan finally received a glimmer of hope. Katrina, the 8-year-old who had been critically injured with a gunshot wound to the head, had miraculously survived.
The round entered to the side of her mouth.
Quite frequently, when somebody's shot in the head or the face, they do die, and she was lucky to survive.
She actually walked away from a shot directly to her face.
At this point, investigators plan to talk with Letitia Yusufpolsky.
Letitia, Katrina's mother, had not left her daughter's side since arriving at the hospital. When Lieutenant Doonan first questioned her about possible links between Bruce's murder and the massacre on Knollcrest Drive, the frustrated young mother cut him off sharply. According to Letitia, the police had it all wrong. Bruce hadn't just attended the party, he was the one in the Santa Claus suit.
This startling revelation opens the door to many new questions for investigators.
I saw him 2 days before Christmas. He was having dinner with his brother. We stopped by and Merry Christmas, how are you?
Bruce Pardo had a clean record. He had no criminal history in his past. This was a college-educated, erudite guy who didn't necessarily fit the profile of somebody who would snap and commit a mass murder.
While nearly everyone they interviewed described Bruce as an upstanding citizen, Letitia painted a vastly different picture. To others, he was a kind neighbor and devoted family man. But to Letitia, Bruce was no victim. He was a cold, calculating monster hiding in plain sight.
This monster. No, this is what he's done. And to carry out and act like this. So he was, I believe he was a psychopath.
With most of the Ortega family gone, Lieutenant Doonan had little opportunity to delve into their complex history. Now, with 8-year-old Katrina stable and out of intensive care, he finally had the chance to sit down with Letitia. She began by describing her family dynamics, particularly her relationships with her 5 older siblings.
Being the youngest of the family, I always said I had 5 sets of parents because they all kind of always looked out for me.
From there, she recounted the story of her sister Sylvia's life and the tragic events that ended her first marriage.
My sister's first husband, he died in a car accident, and she was expecting their second child, and she had been driving. So it was very traumatic to go through that. I was 16 at the time.
Years later, Sylvia returned to Covina to be closer to her family. Through mutual friends, she was introduced to Bruce, and the pair quickly hit it off. Bruce seemed like the perfect match. He wasn't just a brilliant rocket scientist. He also embraced Sylvia's children as his own and expressed his eagerness to become a father. In 2006, they tied the knot and moved in together.
First time I met Bruce was about a month after he moved in. One of us said hello, met his family. They were very, very nice. He seemed to be a very loving and supportive father, and she was obviously a loving and caring mother.
On the surface, everything appeared to be going well, but not long after they settled into their new life, Bruce suffered an accident that changed everything.
He got a pretty serious knee injury, had to have surgery, and it kind of curtailed all the activities that he liked to do. He started putting on weight. Sylvia said they just didn't get along, and it was like Bruce had changed and just kind of more like a hermit. He wasn't the fun guy that she had met and dated, and she moved out in March. The divorce ended up being finalized on December 17th.
December 17th, 2008, just a week before the massacre. While Letitia answered Lieutenant Dunan's questions, more family members and neighbors arrived at the hospital to support her injured daughter. Among them were Amanda and Sal, the 6 and 19-year-old children of Letitia's sister Sylvia. Both had miraculously escaped the blaze and were now at the same hospital. Having just learned that their mother's body was found in the rubble, they reunited with Letitia, Katrina, and the remaining fragments of their family. With the killer still at large, Dunan urgently needed their accounts. After giving everyone a moment to collect themselves, he pulled Letitia, Sal, and the neighbor who had spotted the getaway car aside for questioning. Their recollections seemed almost surreal to the lieutenant. Less than an hour before Santa Claus arrived, the atmosphere at the home of 79-year-old Joseph Ortega had been festive and full of joy. As he did every year for his favorite holiday, Joseph and his wife Alice welcomed their 24 children and grandchildren to celebrate Christmas together under one roof.
I like Christmas so much because he was actually able to bring the family together in one house. We just left our Christmas lights on the year round.
But Joseph's generosity extended beyond his relatives. Known as Papa Joe to the community, he and Alice had also invited their neighbors to join in the festivities. Among the guests was Teresa Ginez, a friendly neighbor unrelated to the Ortegas.
They loved everybody coming over, and they just enjoyed every aspect of it. Typical Christmas Eve at the Ortegas.
One beloved family tradition was to gather for a poker game before midnight. As the final hands were being played and the clock ticked closer to 12, a familiar sound disrupted the merriment.
And there's a doorbell. One of my cousins opens the door, and we see Santa with a couple of presents.
It was not a surprise that Santa came to the door for anyone. It was nothing that would have made them get up from playing cards.
At about 11:30 at night, my daughter started saying that Santa was outside. You know, in the past, we had Santa come around the neighbor and bring toys. So I got up from the living room and went and grabbed my video camera in the dining room and the other room.
A man dressed as Santa Claus entered the house carrying a red bag of presents on his back and a large wrapped gift on a trolley behind him. Sal watched from a distance as Santa greeted his 8-year-old cousin Katrina, who eagerly ran toward him. But instead of offering a hug or a kind word, Santa did the unthinkable. In one swift motion, he drew 2 pistols from his pockets and shot Katrina point blank.
We started hearing balloons popping. I thought they were balloons, and I realized in a split second that they were not. He came in with weapons in his bag and basically tried to take every single one of our lives.
Everybody by this time is screaming and shouting, and I don't have anything in my head but leave. I broke through a window, I punched it with my hand, I shattered it, I jumped through it to get out of the house. It's really the number one thing I regret in my life. Just if I would have turned the other way, done something.
My husband said, grab the kids. My daughter had received the gunshot wound to her face, and thankfully we were able to escape along with some of my nieces and nephews. And so those that were in the house that did not escape were either killed by the guns that he had or by the explosion. That night, I lost 9 of my family members. I lost both my parents, my 2 brothers, my two sisters. Sorry. My two sister-in-laws and my nephew, who was 17.
Amid the chaos outside, Letitia frantically called 911, doing everything in her power to get urgent medical help for her injured daughter. Meanwhile, Teresa and other neighbors sheltered panicked guests who had managed to escape the inferno. As they huddled together, desperately searching for their loved ones, none of them realized they were the only survivors.
By that time, I was already inside my neighbor's house 2 houses down. I didn't see anybody really. I was frantically calling my mom over and over and over and over and over again. I called my sister. She wasn't answering.
As the grim Christmas day came to a close, Lieutenant Doonan prepared to take his final steps in the investigation. Earlier, he had requested a warrant to search Bruce's house following the discovery of his body, and the approval had just come through. Despite the lingering fear that the person responsible for Bruce's death might still be at large, Doonan headed to the residence to verify Letitia's claims. Inside the house, nothing initially stood out, but as Doonan was leaving, he noticed a shed in the backyard. Forcing the door open, he found something that confirmed his suspicions beyond a shadow of a doubt.
It was a treasure trove of information. The boxes from the guns, the ammunition, black powder, bomb-making material.
Bruce was the killer. While awaiting the coroner's final results on the 9 family members and Bruce, Doonan carefully pieced together Sal and Letitia's accounts with the evidence collected from the Ortega house. He now had enough information to construct a rough timeline of the horrific events.
He dressed in a Santa suit, and he probably left his house about 10:45 or so and drove to the Covina area. He knew that Sylvia's whole family would be there, and they would be there late. And he knew that the neighbor had always dressed as Santa and come over to deliver presents to the kids. He parked in the neighbor's driveway.
Doonan presented his findings to his chief, who then organized a press conference. The officers explained how Bruce, dressed as Santa, entered the home and immediately shot little Katrina before turning his guns on the poker table guests until he appeared to run out of ammunition. But the public still had pressing questions. What was in the large gift box Bruce brought with him? And what caused the house to erupt in flames? To these, Doonan now had definitive answers.
The package he had appears to be a homemade pressurized device.
It was a homemade flamethrower filled with jet fuel to burn the house down in a really vicious and horrible way.
Bruce Pardo is a very intelligent guy, and he put a lot of thought into this plan. The one thing that he did not take into account was that there was going to be an open flame inside that house.
The entire living room erupted in flames with Bruce inside, along with the bodies of the Ortega family. Yet Bruce managed to survive the explosion, escape the scene, and even change into fresh clothes before fleeing in his car. Details from the autopsy results, later shared with the public, painted a picture straight out of a horror film.
It's on both arms. It also appears that the Santa Claus suit that he was wearing did melt onto his body.
But one detail continued to trouble Lieutenant Doonan. The evidence at Brad's house still pointed toward murder. Adding to the mystery, over $17,000 in cash was found strapped to Bruce's body. Hoping for more leads, Doonan directed his team to identify every vehicle registered under Bruce's name. Within an hour, they uncovered another alarming clue. A rental car in Bruce's name had been located in a residential neighborhood. Inside the car were gas tanks and a laptop. Suspecting another deadly trap, Doonan ordered a thorough grid search of the area.
After a quick canvass of the neighborhood, detectives learned that the RAV4 was parked about 500 feet from Scott Nord's house. Scott Nord is Sylvia Ortega's divorce attorney.
After the bomb squad determined that the car wasn't rigged, detectives searched it and found maps, clothes, food, and water. It appeared to be Bruce's intended getaway vehicle. Its location, close to Scott Nord's house, led Doonan to believe Bruce's plan had originally included another target, his ex-wife's divorce attorney. Following the trail of clues, Doonan paid a visit to Nord.
According to Scott Nord, a secret from Bruce's past proved to be the linchpin in the dissolution of his marriage to Sylvia.
The lawyer revealed startling information about Bruce's past. He explained that after Bruce's knee injury, Sylvia discovered a shocking secret while filing his tax returns. Bruce had a son from a previous relationship. According to Nord, Bruce's ex-girlfriend revealed that the two had a child, Matthew, 3 years before Bruce met Sylvia. One day when Matthew was 13 months old, the boy's mother left him in Bruce's care while she went grocery shopping. When she returned, she found Bruce exactly where she had left him, drinking a beer in front of the TV, but Matthew was gone.
He survived, but almost in a vegetative state.
Unfortunately, it was a lifelong injury to his brain because he didn't get the oxygen. So he ended up being stuck to a wheelchair for the rest of his life.
After the incident with Matthew, Bruce abandoned both his child and the boy's mother, leaving them behind without a second thought. The only connection he maintained was the child support payments mandated by social services.
There was no attachment there. That kid got hurt and he left.
You can imagine that Sylvia was really scared at this point. She's got 3 children. And here's this man that she's married who's essentially let a child nearly drown and then takes no responsibility for what happened afterward. You know, there's this old adage that you can't live a lie forever. Living a lie really caught up with Bruce.
Lieutenant Doonan had finally uncovered the full truth. When the coroner's final report arrived, it revealed how Bruce had met his end after the massacre. Following his escape from the burning Ortega home, Bruce, still fused to his Santa suit and in excruciating pain, gave up on his plan to kill Scott Nord. Instead, he drove to his brother Brad's house. Investigators concluded that Bruce had likely dropped his first pistol while entering the living room and fired several rounds into the walls, either out of frustration or because his burned arms made it impossible to shoot himself directly. Ultimately, he succeeded in taking his own life in Brad's home.
We don't believe that it was ever his plan to kill himself until he was badly burned.
With all the survivors on the road to recovery, the circumstances surrounding Bruce's death exposed, and every dark secret laid bare, Doonan closed the case within days. However, the lieutenant occasionally revisits the scene of the massacre, reflecting on the tragedy and what could have been. While 9 lives were lost and 3 others came perilously close, the devastation could have been even worse if Bruce's sinister plan had been fully realized. Not only did he aim to wipe out his ex-wife's entire family, but he was also prepared to kill his own mother in the process.
His mother had been invited to the Christmas Eve party, and he intended to kill her because he felt that she had sided with his ex-wife in their divorce. Fortunate for her, she wasn't feeling well that night and stayed home.
If everything works out for the suspect, we're looking somewhere in the area of 30 people. There's no question this is the most compelling story that I've ever been involved in. It was pure damn evil.
In the aftermath, Bruce's shadow lingered over the survivors for some time, but the Ortegas refused to let his actions define their future. Sal, Sylvia's son, took the lessons his mother had taught him and channeled them into overcoming his grief and moving forward.
That no matter what happens, if you have faith and you just persevere and stay strong, you can always come out in the end. He tried to destroy our family, but what he didn't know was our faith. And faith just can't be destroyed.
Amanda, Sylvia's 6-year-old daughter, was adopted by Letitia and became Katrina's new sister.
You actually took in one of your nieces, right?
Yes.
And so not only were you dealing with your own trauma, you're dealing with your niece, your kids witnessing this.
Letitia, once the baby of the Ortega family, faced a pivotal choice: succumb to the sorrow and pain or rise above it to heal herself and her loved ones. She decided that by embracing life with positivity while honoring what had happened, she could set a powerful example for the rest of the survivors as they worked through their own trauma.
I needed to provide that for them. I needed to be the example and show them that, yes, we're sad, we're hurt, but we're going to be okay.
This shift in perspective became a guiding principle for the Ortega family, proving that living in fear and despair was not an option.
The only way I could stop that and have some form of control is to not allow that to still live within us, in my family, in my nieces and nephews, in my children.
Their resilience became a testament to their strength and determination to honor their lost loved ones. Years later, that strength was tested once more. On February 14th, 2018, when Nicholas Cruz opened fire at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, killing 17 people, Katrina, now 17 years old, was flooded with memories of the massacre her own family had endured.
During a school walkout, Katrina Yusuf-Polsky read the names of the 17 victims killed in Parkland, Florida 1 month ago. Nearly 10 years ago, she survived a Christmas Eve massacre when she was only 8. Yusuf-Polsky was shot in the face.
The teenager couldn't ignore the common thread between the two events: gun violence. Determined to take a stand, she organized a walkout with her classmates to raise awareness and combat the terror it caused.
I just knew I had to keep fighting, and I knew I would live my life to the fullest for each one of my family members and everybody affected by gun violence.
However, her fight extends beyond her public role as a gun violence advocate. At home, Katrina followed her mother's example, refusing to let herself be defeated, especially when Christmas Eve, which marked the anniversary of the massacre arrived each year.
She hopes to help others fighting the same battle and credits her mother's faith with shaping her perspective.
Especially with Christmas time, it's been something of light now. It's something my family continues to celebrate instead of look down upon.
Whether it's Letitia, Katrina, Sal, or any other survivor, the Ortegas channel their pain into a steadfast determination to honor their loved ones and create a world that would make the family member they lost proud.
Left here on this earth for a reason. You're left here for a purpose, and your job is to keep fighting.
Knowing what we all went through and where we're at today, my mom would be extremely proud.